This Fleet Equipment Unscripted interview is presented by Hendrickson, a leading manufacturer of heavy-duty suspension systems and components to the global commercial transportation industry. Visit hendrickson-intl.com to learn more.
Hey everyone, I'm Jason Morgan, Content Director for Fleet Equipment. Welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today we're talking with Nick Pittenger, Vice President of Data Services at Decisive. Nick, always great to see you.
Good afternoon, Jason. Good to see you again.
So we have another batch of exclusive data. Always appreciate you bringing us this. We're talking Q4 2024 service activity on the Decisive SRM. We had some predictions from you from the last episode. So let's dive into those. How did Q4 service volumes compare to the previous quarter?
Sure thing. Based on what we had seen with service activity decreasing over the last two quarters, I had predicted last time that we would see this trend reverse in Q4. Specifically, I predicted that we would see an increase of somewhere between 3 and 5%. In Q4, there were 1,113,742 service operations managed on the Decisive SRM platform, which represents a 4.7% increase. So it turns out my prediction was correct, and I was on the higher end of my prediction range. This reversal was driven by increased service activity in 13 of the 25 VMRS system codes, which is up from 7 systems that were increasing in the previous quarter.
Right, let's dive into that a little bit because when we're talking Q4, freight volumes and mileage traditionally falls. We usually see a little bit of a dip there. Fleets, new vehicles are rolling in to fleet service operations. What do you think is explaining some of the higher service volume going on right now?
I think we can get to the best insights probably by looking at the year-over-year comparisons. Based on this most recent VMRS data, the number of service operations year-over-year increased by 7.1%. The latest growth marked the 4th consecutive year-over-year rise. This was driven by higher year-over-year service volume across a number of VMRS systems, 19 of the 25. Specifically, the largest increases in service activity was in 013 brakes, by a substantial amount with a 49.4% increase. Other areas that had notable increases in service activity were 043 exhaust with a 13.2% increase and 001 air conditioning, heating, and ventilating with a 6.6% increase. Digging into that brakes, being up 49.4%, we were really curious of what was going on in that particular area. So we did a little bit of digging into those operations, where they're happening. And what we ended up finding was that there was a large Bendix recall affecting a significant number of truck models. The issue stems from the ECU potentially failing to process signals correctly due to an electrical noise or low signal strength, which can disable some of the safety systems. So we saw 20 to 25,000 additional brake-related operations showing up in that one quarter based on that recall that came out in the October-November 2024 timeframe.
Very cool. I want to dive into that for a minute. I do want to back up. One thing there, because I think you teased that recall, I want to say almost 2 episodes ago when we talked. We do this quarterly, and I think you had it on the radar there earlier, so really interesting to see how that was coming through and impacting the market, because I know that was on the radar. You mentioned the exhausts. I know exhausts, engines, after treatments are always in the top service activity categories there. Sometimes I take that for granted, right? But just, engines, right? A lot of service going on there. But is there anything that you can point to that maybe gives us reasons as to why engines, exhaust, after treatment generate those high volumes of service activity?
Yeah, we could definitely take a shot at it. It's probably not a surprise to anyone that the highest priority for keeping trucks on the road centers around the engine, which is also increasingly complex and therefore most likely to require service. Since we began tracking service activity, 045 power plant service consistently accounts for the highest volume of activity among the 25 VMRS systems tracked by Decisive. This is representing around 20% of the total service activity on a quarter-over-quarter basis. Also, in the top 5 systems are related engine VMRS systems, so specifically 043 exhaust, which we mentioned, with 11.9% of service activity, 013 brakes with 10.4% of the overall activity, and 002 cabin sheet metal at 9.8%. I mentioned earlier that we saw increases year over year with both exhaust system and brakes. For cab and sheet metal, service activity is actually down year over year by 6.5%, but up 1.5% for the quarter.
Yeah, and we've been tracking that cab and sheet metal one. That's always been an interesting one for me. Honestly, on my side, it's a bit of a question mark as to maybe what's driving that. Do you see that increase as a reflection of increased body damage caused by accidents? Is it a manufacturing thing? Are you able to glean anything from the data insights?
With the service activity that we're tracking, we usually don't have visibility into how it happened or why it was in for service. But we do have the ability to track service activity by the age of the truck. By looking at the trends as the truck ages, we can tell if activity is consistent across the various ages. In these age comparisons, for the top systems based on service track transactions, for the fourth quarter in a row, cab and sheet metal service volumes was second among the newest vehicles. It's the third highest in the 3 to 6 year age bucket, and it's the fourth highest among vehicles that were 6 to 9 years and 9+ years old. This indicates the consistency of service activity for newer trucks that we're seeing, and it's likely that the cab and sheet metal service is deferred as that truck ages over time.
Yeah, very interesting. Let's get to the brakes because there was a big uptick there. Obviously, brake service is correlated a lot with mileage. Dropping utilization from lower freight volumes that we usually see in Q4 and the higher service volumes. Anything else that's notable there, knowing that we've already kind of covered the recall?
So while service activity for brakes consistently continues to be one of the drivers of service activity and is increasing, even beyond the recall we discussed earlier, again, kind of looking at the age brackets, brakes were among the top 5 systems across all 4 of the age brackets. So it isn't things specific to newer vehicles versus older vehicles. It's, again, one of those big things about keeping it on the road. We can see the impact of the recent increases in activity by comparing the latest rankings within these age brackets. This quarter, brakes are 1 spot higher among the 0 to 3 years old vehicles and up 2 spots to second place in the 3 to 6 year category, potentially due to the recall like we discussed earlier. Those newer trucks going to be under warranty, have those recalls and things like that. Versus the older ones are going to be outside of that range. However, brakes remained in third for vehicles that were 6 to 9 years and 9+ years old, which were outside of that recall range.
I'm going to throw something at. I'm going to take a pause here. I'm going to throw something at you. I'm going to ask a question. If you don't want to answer it, that's fine. But I do have a follow-up here. But I just want a little caveat before I go into this. Interesting on the brake side. So on that brake service, are you able to look into maybe air disc brake or drum brake? Is there anything in there? That's a conversation that the air disc brake side on the tractor side is kind of grown. It's still yet to grow here on the trailer side. Anything in terms of those discrepancies on the brake service side?
I'd say we haven't dug into the data to that level of detail up to this point. With our VMRS encoding model, we're able to get to that code key 31 system value to identify brake-related operations from other types of operations on the trucks. Getting to that next level, that would be more of like that VMRS code key 32 assembly level to be able to get a layer deeper to have that type of visibility is something that we're working on as a company to try and, again, get more granular, more accurate VMRS-related codes applied to the work that's flowing through our ecosystem. But right now, we haven't been able to kind of get to that level of detail to a quality or volume that we would like just yet to introduce to the industry. But it is something that we're working on to be able to hopefully bring in future sessions.
Very interesting. Nick, always appreciate you taking the time. I find this hugely valuable. I hope to talk to you again as we look in the first quarter of 2025. Excited to get that. This year's flying by. Sure, I'll talk to you again very soon.